Hello, my name is Scott Bonds. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of The Lion's Den, where we are restoring kings one conversation at a time. Today we are fortunate enough to be joined by Dr. Greg Henderson. Dr. Greg is a phenomenal man. He has a phenomenal resume and background. And without going into full detail about what's in his background, I'll just let you know that he has one PhD presently, soon to have 2 PhDs, and we are looking forward to having him share some great information about therapy and counseling for men in particular. Welcome, Dr. Greg.
Thank you.
So glad to have you, man. So glad to have you.
Thank you.
So I wanted to just start by asking the question, how important is it, because as I understand, you counsel primarily black men, but you do other races and everything too. Okay, so where counseling black men in particular are concerned, how important is it for us to seek a counselor who has experience in counseling and therapy beyond the traditional training that traditional training provides? And when I say that, I mean that I'm assuming that what we learn and what you learn on that level in school is kind of European based. And you know, when I was seeking a counselor, I wanted, as I mentioned to you before, I wanted a black man. I wanted him to be close to my age. Where marriage counseling was concerned, I wanted him to be married or have been married. But I want him to have, or her to have, some experience in dealing with the issues firsthand that black people, people of color, not just black, Hispanic, whatever, but people of color deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, it's an excellent question, and one of the things we must realize is that people's struggle is necessary to sort of give them an idea of where they are in life. So whether you're black, white, or Hispanic, the goal right now for men is to really understand what they are as far as their role and the perception of their role in today's society, and then where they want to be, their role later, and their perception of their role. So to kind of articulate one thing is men of color oftentimes have been based off of cultural norms to sort of stay away from the counseling field. One of the main reasons for that is, you know, it's been passed on from generation to generation. And now we're starting to live in this new paradigm time, this 21st century, where technology, where social media, all of this stuff has just kind of been dumped on us. And we have to be prepared in order to address this vast change. And so going to counseling, seeking out someone that might be able to understand this shift in culture, this shift in paradigm, and then to be able to relate, to be able to articulate, to be able to have a flow of consciousness about their concerns as a man of color, or even just being a man. It's always good to be able to address someone that sort of looks like you, that might be going through and feeling and sensing some of the same dynamics in the shift of culture, as well as the shift in just masculinity.
Right, absolutely. Just out of curiosity, when you see a new client, how long does it take for that client to really become comfortable and to really open up? Because, like, you know, just sitting down with a stranger,
right.
You know, you make the appointment, you probably never saw the person ever before. Right. And all of a sudden you're on a sofa, in a chair, talking to a stranger, just opening yourself up, pouring your heart out. Right. How long does it take for a person, and a man in particular, to get to the place where they're really open enough to be transparent enough to allow you to help them to help themselves? Right.
That's an excellent question. Relationships are actually not built on time as we used to look at them. Relationships are built on really the motivation of what you want to do. For example, your motivation is tied to your emotions. How badly or how much do you want to facilitate a change in your life? And so once you've decided that you're at the stage where you want to change, finding that right person, oftentimes you can instantaneously say, you know, I have a connection. I just want to let this, what's in me, out. I don't want to hold back. I don't want to go through this theoretical process that is going to take a month, 2 months, 3 months, because my issues are too critical to me. So I want to be able to feel comfortable about talking about it and knowing that the ethical professionalism of a counselor is going to be able to guide me along the way. So, you know, I've dealt with both men and women, and that's sort of an inclusive question, and it's really about the person's motivation, about their discipline. How disciplined do they want to remain in making a change in their life?
Okay. Now, when we met the first time, we had a really good conversation, and you know, like I told you, I really wanted to record that conversation in full because it was so good in an impromptu conversation. One of the things that kind of resonated with me and really stuck in my head was the example that you use when you use your left hand and your right hand, and we talked about that, and we also talked about you know, the effects of us self-medicating, as I termed it, and the drugs, you know, the women, the alcoholism, so forth and so on. So talk a little bit about that again for us.
So if you take a triangle, and you look at that triangle as it has 3 points, and then there is an open center. Well, let's imagine that open center is the goal of your life. Let's determine that that's the goal that you want to have for your life, whether it be to, let's say, start your business in 5 years. Let's use that as an example. Well, at the top of that triangle, let's look at that as the motivation, the emotions you have behind your energy. How much do you want that? But motivation alone is important, but is it enough to start the change process? So if we go to the left and we take a look, then we have something called the process. Well, the process is really the plan. The plan is very significant. One of the things that's significant about a plan is it has to be measurable. You have to be able to determine if you're taking the necessary steps to become successful. Oftentimes, people say, this is my process, but let's determine, the process means objectives. Objectives are saying that we have the steps, and measurable steps to be successful. But what happens with those steps is, can we maintain consistency? The consistency is what becomes the significant challenge. That becomes the discipline. Do we have the discipline? And so when I use the two-hand example, I got this from my pastor. He said if we look at our left hand is the things that we want to do, but we know we should not do them. And when we start doing those things, let's say we know we need to be studying, we know we need to be writing out our plan. Let's say we don't do it. Well, what happens, that starts to move us further and further away from our goal. Then it starts to diminish the motivation, and then it starts to make the process look somewhat flawed. But if we look at our right hand, and we say, now this is what we know we need to do, but we don't want to do it because it requires us to step away from the things that's going to cause us to have fun and cause us to say, hey man, I'm having a good time. But if we stay focused on this, the discipline process, then what we start to see over a period of time is that those measurable steps in the process, we start to see ourselves making incremental gains toward the goal of accomplishing our business. And so it is one of the most difficult challenges is to maintain discipline, to get up and do it when we want to do it, when we need to do it, because obstacles get in the way.
Right. Yeah, discipline was something that you mentioned when we talked, you said the D word, and
Right.
before you told me what the D word was,
Right.
I was trying to scramble my mind, thinking,
Right,
what could
right,
this D word be? But
right.
discipline, I think, is very essential for us to be successful and to just evolve and progress in life in general.
Correct.
One of the things that I always talk to my friends about as I started the Lions Den was that what I noticed is that we all complain about the same things, whether it's, in our work lives for the most part, trying to get more, trying to have more, trying to make everybody happy, and do all of these things that we're trying to do. And, we can be pretty difficult and tough on ourselves. But the main thing is that as I talk to all my friends, we all are talking about the same things, but we don't typically open up to one another,
Right.
and have these conversations that are necessary for us to have that could help us heal just by sharing our experiences.
Right.
Why don't we talk to each other? Why don't we want to say, look, man, I'm struggling in this area. Look, I'm having a problem with my marriage. Look, my kids are driving me crazy. Why don't we openly talk about these things? What is it?
Yeah. So one of the things I would always say to my partner, I always talk to him when my best friend, and I would say to him, look, man, stop concerning yourself with what society, what your cultures, how they look at you, how you perceive you need to look in front of your people, because when you are put in that casket, who's going to be in there with you?
Oh man, that's exactly what I just got finished talking about the other day. I was just saying how, with the passing of my father recently, and as we buried him, and I was physically in the grave, lowering his body in the grave in the position, and I had a lot of conversations that me and my dad had over the years.
Right.
But the biggest thing that stood out to me was that, he told me not to find myself of old age and have a lot of regrets.
Right.
He said, try all the things that you think you would be good at, but even try the things that you think that you might not be that good at.
Right.
And what conclusion I came to was that a lot of times we don't do things because we're worried about what this person is going to say, what this person is going to think, and all this kind of stuff. And as I put my father in that grave, I realized that it's just him. That's it. All the people who had opinions and thoughts and all that it doesn't matter. So with that, I decided I'm gonna go for everything, man, because life is short. One of the things I heard recently that was just a remarkable statement was that the days are long, but the years are short. And that really is a very real and powerful statement.
It is.
Let me rephrase. Is it healthy for men to cry? My mother used to tell me that women tend to live a lot longer because women cry. They show their emotions, and men hold it in, and that's why we don't live as long as women. What's your take on that?
Excuse me, interesting point. So, our prefrontal cortex stops developing around the age of 25. So we have this impression that this is how we're going to proceed through life. And somewhere along the line, there was this adage that men shouldn't cry. Now, interesting about that is that's sort of obsolete now, because when that had taken place, it was dual families. You had a father and a mother.
Right.
Now we have more so single parent homes in a black community. It's becoming larger and larger, so being run by mothers. And males are allowed to cry more often. And so when they're allowed to cry, it allows themselves to have sure expression, that their expression in life becomes more authentic. They have a a sort of a fictitious expression if they have not really cried through their life, because they don't necessarily oftentimes know how to attach their emotions to things when they have been told not to cry. Now, I would imagine our generation, baby boom generation, you know, we both parents, and my father, man, stop crying.
Right.
Even when they whoop me, stop crying.
Right.
So, but to allow yourself to have full range of expression, to cry, to laugh, to be angry. I think Jimmy Valvano said it best. We become whole.
Mm-hmm.
We become whole. And so crying has to be defined by a person as, why am I crying? Am I crying because of how I feel about myself? Am I crying because of I've been hurt? Am I crying because of, you know, whatever the reason? A person's definition of when their emotions lead them to cry, they should allow it to have free flow. They should allow it.
Right.
Because it's healthy, and they will find themselves to become better communicators, better in relationships, and better with interdependent communication and intradependent, communicating with themselves, because they have a true, authentic view of themselves.
So, do you think that as healthy as it is for us to cry, it has to be, it's, you know, in raising kids in particular, like with me, like you said, you know, I might spank my son or pop him or something, and then, you know, he'll cry a little bit, and I say, you better stop that crying, you know, because I want him to be able to cry, but not to take it too far.
Right.
And, you know,
Watch the manipulation now. If they know, when kids are born, they are the best communicators in the world. When they cry, they want to be changed, they want to be fed, something about. So we tend to seek out what it is they're crying about. And if that behavior, you know, is almost the operant conditioning, classical conditioning, if that behavior continues, you know, as they get older, and they keep crying, and they know, well, no one's ever told me it's not going to work since it's been working when I was a child. I'll keep doing it.
Right.
You have to be careful as to when that crying becomes a manipulation. Too.
Right, absolutely.
Because kids are masters at it.
Absolutely, all day long. So, with that being said, how is crying viewed by a man's woman, your spouse? Like, you know, sometimes if a man cries and his wife or girlfriend sees him, it can have adverse effects or it can have a positive effect. You know, sometimes, you know, the woman can really feel the man and what he's going through. Other times it's viewed as a sign of weakness.
Right.
So should there be some, like, times where a man's gonna cry, but we're gonna go in the closet and cry. We're gonna go in the bathroom for a while and sit down and cry, independent of our woman come out, like we're okay. Like, what? How's that work? What do you think?
It's interesting. I think my tenet on that is this: it doesn't matter. I don't care if my woman likes me crying or doesn't like me crying. It's about me, how I feel. I need to be whole. I'm not doing this for her. When I do it for her, then am I giving her a true picture of myself? If she views me as weak, then she's not the right woman. If she views me as strong, she may not be the right woman. The fact is, just view me as being human and being myself.
Right.
So crying is not to, you know, expose yourself, your weakness to someone else. Crying is to allow yourself to relieve whatever pain, to relieve whatever joy for yourself so that you can be whole. It is not necessarily to get an affect of thought or opinion from your significant other. That's not the role of crying. It should never be to show someone else that you feel. It should be an authentic view of how you are feeling internally.
Absolutely, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Let's shift gears for a second. Earlier you mentioned social media.
Right.
Social media can be a source that can really begin to create deep depression for a lot of people. I think that a lot of the younger people and some the older people, I've lost some friends that I went to high school with from suicide, and some of them, one in particular, posted it on Instagram as she was in the process of committing suicide by hanging herself.
Yes.
I have experienced, like, I've seen myself begin to become somewhat depressed, because when you look on social media, it's hard to remember that people are posting and talking about the best of their lives.
Yes.
No one wants to put out the negative parts of their lives. So when you're in a bad place and you're scrolling and you see this person on this vacation, this person bought a new house, this person bought a new car, and you're feeling like, well, hell, what's going on with my life? What's wrong with me? Like, do you see that as a problem? Are people using that to, like, build themselves up in many instances and create false realities for themselves?
Yeah. So I give the example of this. If you on this world by yourself, would social media matter?
Right.
So it actually shouldn't matter from a standpoint. When you use the term depressed, then if we're looking at it from a true diagnostic concern where there's a mental illness, that's one thing. But when we bring in one specific area, social media, then I look at it as more of a verb. We start depressing because all of a sudden something doesn't look the way we would like for it to look. So we place value on it. I don't do social media, I can't stand social media, but I'm not afraid of social media. But my whole point is, what do you place value on? I place value on me. I place value on my kid. I place more value on being committed to the Word. And so where you place your value is where you're literally going to have, that's where your strength is going to lie. So when individuals start looking at social media as, oh my God, they know this about me, my world has come to an end, and you start having suicidal ideations or homicidal ideations, part of that is you place value and giving value to other people's opinion. Even if it's not true, people are going to look at you and make judgment guesses about you, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. You have to, I guess, Rudolph Kipling once said, you have to treat the two imposters the same. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, you treat them both the same, as though, hey, it is what it is. And you are able to sort of migrate through this thing called life a little more successfully without depressing about what might be said over it.
Right.
Take it as a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's good advice. Good advice. So you mentioned you value the Word.
Correct.
How important, and does it make counseling better and more effective if the person seeking therapy or counseling combines that counseling with a strong spiritual foundation, a spiritual base, not so much a religious base, but a spiritual foundation? Is that important, and does it really help the process?
I believe that it does. Now, I have dealt with atheists. I have dealt with devil worshippers. I have dealt with devout Christians. And my goal is, can I get you to where you want to be? That's my goal. From a spiritual perspective, I look at everyone as being human. We all have a view of life. And so when I ask God, how do I address this? He always tends to provide passengers that I can kind of make secular in order to sort of get a person to evaluate what they're saying to me so that they can make the appropriate steps to accomplish whatever their goals are, whether it be to look at themselves differently, whether it be to deal with family matters differently. It's, again, I'm grounded, but because I'm a professional, I get to use a lot of the theory and a lot of my practice, as well as a lot of my experiences, to really try to help individuals. But the spirituality of it is sort of the umbrella.
Right. We're going to also deal with marriage counseling and relationships and things along those lines. Do you have a lot of couples that come to you for marriage counseling?
Yeah.
And like how effective is it? Does it help people get through the tough times and they stay together, or does it more often help people realize that they've grown apart, or that their differences are just not going to work out.
So it's interesting. My point on marriage counseling, if you are starting to come to marriage counseling once your marriage is starting to go on the rocks, it's already over.
Okay.
You know, so one of my first questions that I will pour each person aside, and I ask them, do you want to be married? Give me a percentage. If that percentage is lower than, let's say 6%, if we're at 5 and so you're vacillating, you really don't know, or if you're at from 5 on down, I start to sort of coach you into being, amicable with one another as I said, look, obviously at this point, you're going to need some time apart. There's no point in me giving you strategies as to how to best, work through things. Now, with that being said, I have had couples that said we want to be together, and they can clearly articulate what's been going on in their life. Usually it comes down to not listening to each other, what we call active listening, being able to hear that person's full thought and then sort of paraphrasing what they said so that other person knows that what they've said, and then be able to say, okay, now I can see your perspective. We want to cut people's communication off when they get to a key phrase or word that says, that's not true. This is, and instead of allowing them their full conscious flow, their full thought. I do quite a bit of what I call marriage counseling and coaching. And one of the, I guess the central theme is if they genuinely love one another, they will be able to work through it. If they are doing it because they want to be together for the kids, it is not going to work.
Right.
Yeah, that's just something that I've seen in pretty much all of the situations where I have worked with couples. If you're saying, well, I have kids, if that's the first thing out of your mouth, that marriage is already over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people stay married for kids. Some people get married because of a child.
And it's unhealthy.
I agree wholeheartedly. But I will say that I think that when you have children, it helps you work a little bit harder. I know it helped me work harder.
Correct.
Because for me, the importance of my family staying together
Yes.
is major, because
Yes.
I think that when a family separates, you can still win, but everybody still loses to a degree as well.
Right. The big question is, why did you get married in the beginning? Was it a courtship? Was it physical attraction? Was it just seemed right? Was it I prayed and God delivered this? Did you create your rationale for getting married to this person? And if that's the case, you got to remember, this is not just a 1/4 marriage.
Right.
You're going to have 4 quarters in this marriage.
Four more.
And when you get to that last quarter, you're tired. That means time has passed in that marriage, and you're tired. And so, what is it that you were doing to say? How did you develop what I call deposits? Did you put deposits into this marriage? Did you, so that when things start to go rough, what can you pull from? Say, you remember when we did this and how we came through this together? So now that you have sort of a movie reel to look back at things, you remember we went through times like this and this is how we pulled through together.
Yeah.
You give yourself some deposits that you can pull from, almost like making bank accounts, and it draws interest over time because it makes you stronger.
Right. Yeah, I heard I had an attorney of mine tell me years ago that he falls in and out of love with his wife every week. And he said the memory of the good times that they shared is what helps them get through the bad times that they encounter.
Right.
And then I had another gentleman tell me one time that marriage is like building a fire.
Yeah.
You have the fireplace and the fire is roaring and stuff. you can't just sit back and enjoy the warmth of the fire and look at the fire and think how beautiful it is. You got to tend the fire. You got to keep putting logs in it. You got to stoke it. You got to keep that fire going. As soon as you believe that the fire is good and it can just burn by itself, it's about to be over.
It's about to be over. When you believe that we have a good marriage and you stop putting that marriage under construction, it's no longer under construction, times are changing. And it's going to start wearing down. And guess what? Then you're going to try to do something real quick to, kind of like say, okay, we need to do this real fast. And it's too late.
Yeah. Because
the street light has come on and they say, I'm done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these are some of the things that we're going to discuss on the next episode with Dr. Greg Henderson. And we're going to have our other 4 guests that we had on previously on the Lions Den that we discussed fatherhood. Once again, we all share very similar issues and challenges throughout our lives. And it is my belief and my thought that if we come together in the Lions Den in this instance and allow ourselves to be transparent and share our experiences with one another, I know we can help each other get through many of the tough times that we experienced in life. And life can just become more colorful and just a happier place and a happier experience. Again, this is the Lions Den, and we are Restoring Kings, one conversation at a time. And I thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to you the next time we're here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Okay.